we continue on, get your handouts, pages 6 and 7 out. We had those this last session. Look at page 7. Now we talked about the one on the right here, I don't know, a couple times ago. That is an image of the goddess Diana. And what I wanted you to really see by this, of course, there's a lot of symbolism and Babylonian symbolism. Of course, this was in Ephesus. This is where the goddess Diana, the seat of the worship was in Ephesus. But what I wanted you to look was on top of her head that looks like a hat, but that's not a hat. That's the Tower of Babel. Again, there's connection. There's connections all in. And so are there conspiracies? Of course there are conspiracies. But now, over on the left-hand side, now that is a modern image. If you go to Europe today, you'll see that image. And all of those stars around the head, that's supposedly Mary, and that's the stars of the European economic empire. And that is their symbol that they use. And anyway, but notice how she stands, very similar to the stance of that idol over here. And so there is definitely a connection with that. But then on the bottom, that picture there, if you can tell it is a picture. It comes up, after you copy for a while, they'll come out pretty dark. But this is the inside of the Vatican, or St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome. It's a huge place. But as you go up those steps, you see those steps on the outside on that other one, and you go in that door and go all the way in. What you're seeing here is all on the front wall of the St. Peter's Cathedral, so-called. And right in the middle, if you look down there, you have to look really hard, but you can see a whole lot of guys standing in white robes. No, it's not a meeting of the Ku Klux Klan, but it kind of looks that way, doesn't it? Anyway, it's a Klan, all right. But you see all those guys standing, so you look at those pillars and look how gigantic that is in comparison with those men. They're 5 to 6 foot tall. It's just a huge place. And you see those columns. Those would be called serpentine columns because they look similar to a serpent because they're twisted like that. And there's 4 of them. And where I've got those arrows drawn there's at the top of those columns, there's a square. And on each side of that square, you can barely look inside of one of those arrows with the light. You've got a sun face with a sunburst. So you've got 4 of those on each column. Now, why would you have that? And then the ceiling of that so-called altar there, that big place, it's a gigantic sunburst. And then over to the left in that alcove, they've got another fancy name for it, but it's an alcove. If you look on your left, it's a gigantic sunburst. I don't know whether it's gold or not. It's gold plated if it's not gold. But in the middle of it is a window, a round window. And it's designed that when the sun is at its height at noon, that sun directly shines in that window. This whole thing is dedicated to the sun. And why? Well, as we said, the Persian, Mithras, the sun god, the Persian sun god. Zoroastrianism and Mithraism, they derive, the Zoroastrianism derives from the Mithras. But that's what Constantine was. He was the high priest of the Mithraic sun god worship. He was called as that Pontifex Maximus. The name of the Pope, the title of the Pope today is Pontifex Maximus. You can see that in any of these writings, newspaper stories, all about the Pope. You'll see the Pontiff, the Supreme Pontiff, and if they give you the whole title, it'll be Pontifex Maximus. Well, Latin. Maximus is supreme. Pontiff, the bridge to the gods. And that's what the Pope is. He's Pontifex Maximus. That cannot be coincidental. You have nothing even close to that in the scriptures. But that's what you've got. And then the garb that he wears that we talked about this morning. Now, if you come up with questions, write them down. I'll get them. Try to get them anyway. Here we got up here in the 8th century, but let's back up a little bit. Where, back in that time, where were all of the denominations? They weren't. They didn't exist. You had Hinduism, Buddhism, and where was Islam? It didn't exist. And yet, to hear the news reporters, CNN and others, they'll talk about Islam as being such an old religion. And they give it credence as being the authoritative, old, and all of that. Truth of the matter is, it didn't even exist. Jesus began his church, founded his church during his public ministry around 30 AD. You get up here to the 6th century, then to the 7th century, then to the 8th century. There is no such thing as Islam. Doesn't exist. None of those other denominations exist. Lutheranism, Episcopalianism, and all of those other isms. None of those existed. What did you have? You had Baptist churches that believed and practiced Baptist doctrine, and you had those that had fallen into heresy. That's what you had. Were they denominational? No, there was no denomination set. Now here you see all of the black dots morphing into there's this hierarchy. Well, hierarchy means a bunch of chief operators that control everything. Well, here you have this hierarchy, and ultimately is the Catholic. Well, Catholic is universal, but it's Roman Catholic hierarchy. And they all develop, morph into that. Okay. 570 AD, somewhere thereabouts, Muhammad was born in Saudi Arabia. Now, there's a lot of myths about him. Very little really known about him. But the truth of the matter is, he was an Arabian pagan. When Muhammad was born, the world he came into, he was out of the Quraysh tribe of Saudi Arabia. His family worshiped Allah in the Kaaba. But there were many other gods in the Kaaba. The Kaaba is just a cube. It was a square building in Mecca or Medina. And they, the Kaaba, you go into it, you had pagan god after pagan god all around. It's just that Muhammad's tribe favored the pagan god Allah, who was the Arabian moon god. They've got an old statue they uncovered from way before that, a statue of Allah, the moon god, and on his chest is a quarter moon. Now I understand that there's some that say, oh, well, all that stuff just accidental. By the way, if you look at a Muslim mosque, I can't say all of them because I haven't seen all of them, but the majority of them that you see, they've got their symbol on the top of their mosque, just like most other churches have their symbol. And their symbol is a quarter moon with the star. Well, ask a Muslim, what does that quarter moon symbolize? They probably can't tell you, and if it's an imam, he probably won't want to tell you. But what does that mean? Does it just mean, oh, it means nothing? If somebody's flying a swastika in their front yard, would you let them say, well, that doesn't mean anything? It means something or you wouldn't be flying it. What does that quarter moon, what does that stand for? What's the symbolism of it? Tell me. You claim that you're not an idolater. You claim that you worship the only God, Allah. Well, what does that quarter moon, what does that indicate? And that star, well, the star is Muhammad, his prophet, chief prophet. And that quarter moon is the symbol for Allah, the Arabian pagan moon god. All right. So Muhammad grows up now. I thought to say this, but I don't care whether somebody's got a physical problem. They said he was an epileptic. My heart goes out to somebody's epileptic. It's a problem. It shouldn't be, but whether he was that way or not, that's what they say. But here's what they do say about it. He was illiterate. You know what it means to be illiterate? You can't read and you can't write. I'm not talking about English. I'm talking about Arabian, Arabic. He couldn't read or write. Don't have any evidence that he ever did learn to read and to write. Well, that's kind of significant because after the Islam was started, and he's the chief starter, he is supposed to have been responsible for the writing of the Quran. Well, one thing for sure, if he's illiterate, he couldn't be. And I've never heard anybody else talk about this. He couldn't have read it. So it's almost 100% certain that for one reason, Muhammad never read the Quran because he couldn't read. But then there's another reason. There is no evidence, no documentary evidence like existing papers of the Quran even in existence until 150 years after Muhammad died. That would add fuel to that fire, wouldn't it? It didn't even exist till 150 years after he died. So when they say that Muhammad wrote the Quran, he couldn't have written it. He was illiterate, and there's no evidence in the 6th century or the 7th century. There's not even one scrap of a Quran from those times. You have to get on up here before you find any evidence. But allegedly, the Quran was a group of recitations that Muhammad got from the angel Gabriel. And then they were written down. Well, here's what happened. There's good evidence on all this, good evidence. Of course, they don't want you to know about it. But there was a rich Lebanese widow who was a dyed-in-the-wool Catholic. And she got up in age. She gave her whole fortune to the Catholic Church. And she moved into a convent. She didn't become a nun, but she moved into a convent. She was going to live there the rest of her life. But she'd already given all of her money to the Catholic Church. But evidently she wasn't that old. And the Pope sends her out to find somebody that they can mold into the head of a new religion. And what they wanted was a religion that they control Arabs with. Because the Catholic Church, the popes, wanted Jerusalem and the Holy Land because of all of the artifacts and the money they could make from it. And it was the Muslims that were, or the Arabians and Turks that were in, Ottomans that were in Jerusalem. And so they wanted to control the Arabians. So Khadijah, the widow, goes out and finds Muhammad. And she marries him. And she's got a nephew named Waraka. And that's how they formulate the Islamic religion. There are writings that they're guarding with their lives. The Muslims and the Catholics don't want you to get them, because if you get them, you'll know the absolute truth of this, that Islam was manufactured by the Roman Catholic Church. And those are the names of those that are involved in it. Well, Muhammad was a pretty wild fellow. And he raided camel caravans, just like the old Wild West stagecoach robbers. Only he robbed camel caravans, slaughtered, got his men, they slaughtered them. They were a warfaring religion. But what they were Arabs. And their whole religion is a revival or a preservation of ancient Arab culture. Now you look at how they dress from that time in Arabia. All of their stuff, it's Arabian. They do their stuff, they are Arabian. And that's what that religion is. It is an Arabic culture religion. It is a mixture, a hodgepodge mixture. They've got their Quran, they've got their Hadith. You heard of that one? The Quran is supposed to be the actual recitations that came from the angel Gabriel to Muhammad. The Hadith is I think there's about 6 books in that. Those are the sayings of Muhammad. And that Sharia law comes from both of those. But both of them are fraudulent. Both of those books are fraudulent. But here's the point, that by 622, right about there, that is the date of the beginning of Islam. They call the Hijrah, is what they call that. All of their dates go back to 622 AD, and it goes from there. Now, they start in Saudi Arabia. Mecca and Medina are their 2 big cities there. The 2 cities that they are, that's their headquarters. But they begin with the sword to spread Islamic religion. They go all the way across northern Africa. Now, the Pope is still all right with them because what they're doing, they're clearing out all of the Donatists from northern Africa. That helps the Catholic Church, and it inadvertently helps Islam. But how does Islam, how do they take care? They put the sword, you'll either bow to Allah or we'll cut your head off. And they did many other things. You think these people bowed to Allah? I don't think they did. Maybe some of them did, but I don't think they did. And so it pretty much wipes out northern Africa as far as Baptists are concerned, Donatists. They move up to Armenia, move across Asia Minor, Turkey, then they move around up across the Mediterranean into Spain. Much of southern Spain is about all Muslim today, as we speak. And they moved and kept on moving all the way up into the northern half of France. By 732, I don't know if we got that date down or not, we ought to. 732 is the date of the Battle of Tours, Tours. And that is the battle where Charles Martel, who's early on for Charlemagne in the same line, Charles Martel stops the advance of the Muslim hordes at Tours in France in the year 732. But now, you start in 622 to 732, that means 110 years. If you look at all of the territory that Islam captured, they captured more territory in 110 years than the Roman Empire did in 666 years. And then Obama and all of his ilk, they tell us how Islam is a religion of peace. It never was. It is not now. So that's the beginning of Islam, which develops into this all the way up here. Then you have the Crusades. We'll get into that a little bit, but that's all about Islam. The Crusades of the Middle Ages is all about Islam. So you see the Dark Ages and what control that Europe had on, or that the Catholic Church had on Europe. Do you know where our colonials, Jamestown, early on here, do you know where those people, where they came from? Most of them came from Europe. But do you know where they got the mentality of slavery? They got it from Rome. They got it from Europe. That mentality of slavery and servitude came from Europe. And they brought it over here with them. We didn't devise slavery here. It was brought over here. Now, should we have picked it up? No, but we did. But it did not originate with us, and I'm sick and tired of early Americans being blamed for everything that the Catholic Church in Europe did. Now, there have been slaves all along. Islam practices slavery. Islam teaches slavery. And as I speak, many of the northern African nations are right now practicing slavery, buying and selling black human beings because Islam, and I do not understand why there are black people that like, what's his name, Farrakhan, and why do they think they belong in Islam? Islam has enslaved them. We haven't. Islam, and still is enslaving them. And how come they're not doing anything about all the African slaves right now that are being bought and sold in slavery? The countries of Mauritania and many of those northern African nations, much of the population is enslaved. And they buy and sell human beings just like, and then they talk about how bad it was here. Well, we're a long ways removed from that. But they're still doing it there. And if they're so concerned about it, how come they don't do something about it over there? Anyway, in Europe, if they weren't slaves, they were peasants, feudal lords, and all of that. Where did the Anabaptists come from? Poor people. And so all of that played a big part in Dark Ages. Europe. We have all of our groups. We've got the Frankish Empire that develops into the Holy Roman Empire, which gains control. I'll tell you something else they did. As well, the Catholics, at least those that were controlled by the Pope, and you have to call them Catholics because that's who they gave allegiance to, was to the Pope. As they moved all over the northern European nations, for example, Germany, all of the other northern nations, those that had been Vikings, they were all pagan. They had the god Odin. Well, I don't know a whole lot about Odin. I know he was a pagan god that they all bowed before, and the Germans did, and all of that. But do you know what they picked up? As they would subjugate those tribes and those nations, and they would make them subjects of Rome. Not only their own subjects, but they're all subjects of Rome. They all bowed to the Pope. That's where they picked up all of their Easter and Christmas worship. Where did evergreen trees come from? Mistletoe. Where did all of that stuff come from? It didn't come from the Bible. The only thing in the Bible that looks like a Christmas tree is that poor man's idol that's in Jeremiah 10. And he says, don't learn the way of the heathen. So where did all that come from? And now it won't be long. Now we're already getting close to the time that people are going to be, I guarantee you, they'll be more involved in Christmas than they will be in coming to the church, to the house of God. And they'll say, oh, well, we're all just celebrating Christ's birthday. No, you're not. You're celebrating heathenism. That's what you're celebrating. And where did all that come from? It didn't come from the Word of God. It didn't come from the Word of God. Jordan, do what she says. Come up there and do it. It didn't come from the Word of God. They picked it up from the pagans of northern Europe, the Teutons and all the Teutonic gods and all that. Even down to the 12 days of Christmas. Give me 12 days of Christmas from the Bible. Give me anything close to it from the Bible. And everybody loves that song, On the First Day of Christmas, on the second day of Christmas, and you got all those things, chickens harping and piping and all of that ridiculous garbage. Where did all that come from? That came right straight from Teutonic pagan god worship. Right now, as I speak, the pagan worship right now, they do celebrate 12 days of Yuletide. Well, you see, the Yuletide log, that came from Northern Europe. Now, who exactly brought it, I don't know whether it's Charlemagne, but somebody like Charlemagne that brought that in, and because they would amalgamate all that stuff, and they wouldn't alienate the pagans. They could keep the pagans and do all of that, just like in Mexico with the mother and child. They already had her mother and child worship. Now they just bring in Mary and so-called Jesus and amalgamate that, and they're all happy. We keep the same, just maybe put some clothes on them and call them by a different name. We got the same gods. Well, you see the way it was supposed to be, and this is their legend, myth for all their worship. Back at the Tower of Babel, you had Nimrod, and you had his wife Semiramis. Now Nimrod appears in Genesis 10th chapter. Semiramis doesn't appear there. No problem. You see a lot of those genealogies didn't have room for women, just put men. But Semiramis was his wife. Well, Nimrod got killed. And it was a boar hog that killed him. Well, do you know why people want to have a ham at Christmas time? Pay back that hog. And the practice of a Christmas tree, now people put them up all year long, put them in every room and all that. They're that idiotic over it. But, you know, the practice of a Christmas tree, here's how it originally went. The Christmas tree wasn't even put up until after the kids went to bed on December the 24th. Did you know that? I mean, it hadn't been that long ago. I mean, this thing just got started back in the late 1800s, you know. And that's how it used to go, and here's why. They would bring that tree in, and they'd put all their heathen symbols on there, star, sun, and moon, and they would burn the Yuletide log all night. So in the morning, y'all need to pay attention to me and quit talking. You've got nothing to talk about. In the morning, when they would wake up, the Yuletide log was ash. It was gone. But in its place, there was the Christmas tree, evergreen, Christmas tree, decorated. And you know who that tree was? It was Nimrod reborn, resurrected. Only his name is now Tammuz. You know, in the book of Ezekiel, it talks about the women of Israel weeping for Tammuz. So now here's the Christmas tree. The kids get up in the morning, and there they see the Yuletide log is gone, but now there's a resurrected Christmas tree, and there's Tammuz. Now guess what? Semiramis has lost her husband but gained a son. Now her son is her husband. And that's the legend. That's where all that came from. And I don't know, people may put other stuff on Christmas trees, Christmas trees now, But you go to Germany. Be in Germany at Christmas time. Utah, and I don't know what the other countries are or not. I haven't been those countries at Christmas time. But I know one thing, buddy. You want to see sun, moon, stars. I mean, they're loaded with them. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. All of that pagan symbolism. So, that's where all this stuff came from. I was going to get you one other thing here on Islam. We're back here at 622, then on up, and it grows. Islam really grows. But they had a problem early on. You see, Allah, the Arabian pagan moon god, and they were actually worshiping him. At least that Quraysh tribe was, probably some others, but that's Muhammad's tribe. They were actually worshiping that pagan god in the Kaaba. But that Allah had a little problem. He had 3 daughters. Now Islam, Muslims will tell you, oh, they're monotheists. They're not idolaters. They just worship Allah. Well, they didn't start out that way. Some of the Arabs, the Arabian women, they contacted Muhammad and wanted to know if they could continue to worship the 3 daughters of Allah. Alat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. Those are the names of the 3 daughters of Allah. And they got permission. Somebody wrote it for Muhammad, and those writings exist. But do you know what they call, what Islam calls those permission slips to worship the 3 daughters of Allah? The satanic verses. Now, some of you might remember, some of you probably don't, but a few years back, a guy by the name of Salman Rushdie, he's still alive, he wrote a book called The Satanic Verses. And because he knows the inner workings of Islam. Well, I've got it back there, and I've read parts of it. But you know that Islam put out a death order on Salman Rushdie? As far as I know, it still exists today, and if they ever catch him, he's a dead man. And you know they'll kill him. They don't mind killing anybody. But here's what happened with that book. He wrote a story, and it was a really involved story. I forget all the fairly modern characters and all that. But in that book, Salman Rushdie wrote it so that all 3 of those daughters appeared in that book. And if you knew what you were reading, you knew what he was revealing, the 3 daughters of Allah, Alat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. And that's why that book was absolutely dangerous to have, still is. But that's why, because he blew the whistle on Islam in that he did that. All right? Now let's see what else we're going to get into right here. We've got our groups. We've got our Paulician. Well, let's back up. You've got the Montanists. You've got the Novatians. The Montanists were in Phrygia. That's Asia Minor. That's where they were centered, mostly. And the Novatians were in Italy, in Rome, around there, and the Donatists are in northern Africa. But you see, there's evidence that all three of those groups, as they were scattered all over, they interchanged members because they were just alike. So these names are, you're not to believe that, or to assume that there are different groups. They're simply in different locations, and they basically believe the same thing, and they all prove to be Baptists in doctrine and practice. In the 1800s, I've got the books, David Benedict brought out a general history of the Baptist denomination. And that book, he said that the Donatists weren't Baptists. It was a pretty good Baptist history book, but he said they weren't Baptist. And when that book was published, some of the brethren got a hold of him. Said, brother, you need to go back and refigure that. That's not, what you're saying is not true. But all he did is what so many other people do. They just get what one writer says and take it as gospel. And that's what he did. But he went back and made another study of it. And as a result, he came out with a book, The History of the Donatists. And in that book, he concluded that they were Baptists for the most part. Amongst Baptists, you've always got people that go into heresy that don't stand for the whole council. But then you have the Patarinis in Italy, the Bogomils in Bulgaria, Petrobrusians in the south of France, the Henricians, Henricius, Henry of Lausanne, that's who he was. But followers of Henry were Henricians. That's why they're called that. But Lausanne was in France. The Arnoldists, they were in Italy, and the Waldenses in the Piedmont valleys, and they spread around. So you have all of those groups that are around, but they're all basically the same. Now there are variations within some of them, but for the most part they are all Baptist. Many of these, the Waldensians and many others, we have proof that they taught the doctrine of election. And so they weren't rank Arminians. You have now your persecutions. We started off with the persecutions coming from the Jews. Then the pagans. After 70 AD, the Jews no longer provided a threat for them. Now it's all from the pagans. Sometimes it's severe, sometimes it's not so severe. All the way up to the time of Constantine. Sometimes bad, sometimes not so bad. Always persecution, but sometimes not as bad as others. But after Constantine comes to the throne, he declares Christianity to be legitimate. And finally, under, I think, Theodosius, it's absolutely declared to be the religion of Rome. Then it is the religion of Rome. Now things have taken a change. Where's our persecutions coming from? Now our persecutions are coming from those who claim to be the same as we are. That is from Roman Catholics. And then a little later on, Greek Catholics. Something else we need to mention in talking about governments. When Constantine unites church and state, he almost immediately moves the seat of his government to Byzantium, Constantinople. Constantinople is named after Constantine. And this is the effective beginning of the Byzantine Empire. Anybody hear of the Byzantine Empire? Well, the Byzantines lasted all the way up to the 15th century when the Ottoman Turks ruled. And so this was, and what the Byzantine Empire was, it was the eastern rule of Rome. Rome was in the west. But what was in the west after the politics were gone? The religion. The Pope takes over. And so is Rome dead? No, it just looked like it. And the one ruling there is the Pope. But political Rome is in the east at the Byzantines. And there's a whole lot of history there with, the Byzantines. Well, even all the way up to Russia, you look at the design of their buildings. It goes back to the Byzantines. And so then their religion comes to a head right here. The split with the east, the west, and the east. It always was there. Constantine even made it worse, but it was always there until it came to a real head at 869. Now there's some disagree on that date, and I'm not expert enough to agree or disagree, but I think that's the essential date when they did split. And so you see from here, it's a hierarchy of the Catholics, but then by 869, there's Greek Catholic or the Eastern Orthodox, and there's the Roman Catholic or the Western Catholic Church. And so that goes back to the 9th century. And essentially, it is still split today as we speak. Now, what's the difference between the Roman and the Greek Catholic, Eastern and the West? Well, if you talk about the Eastern, you talk about Orthodox. Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox. But they're all Orthodox, whereas the Western is Roman Catholic. But why do they call them Orthodox? Well, one thing, the Eastern Orthodox do not recognize a pope. They have one fella, but he's not a pope. All of their priests are permitted to marry. And then they don't sprinkle their babies. Well, Orthodox just means straight teaching. Dox is from the Greek for teaching. Ortho is from straight. You go to orthopedist, straight bones, straight feet. So Orthodox is straight teaching. And why are they straight teaching? The Eastern. Because they know what the Greek means. They're Greek. And Greek, baptizo means immerse. So they immerse their babies, whereas the Roman Catholics sprinkle theirs. All right, so we've got all of these various groups, and there are even others. You call them poor men of lines, the Lollards, Hussites. But like the Hussites, they're followers of John Huss. All of these various names, and most of them came from their enemies. Like most of the history about them comes from their enemies. And so if you read in things that just kind of not good about them, consider the source. Let's see. Hillary Clinton writes a book about President Trump. Do you kind of know what's going to be there before you ever open the book? John Kerry writes a book about it. You know what's going to be there before you ever open the book. You don't have to buy it and open it to know what's there. Or any of those people. When your enemy, one who literally hates you, you know what they're going to write about you. Anyway, they all, at one time or another, were accused of Manichaeanism. That too is a holdover from the old Persian dualism, Zoroastrianism and Manichaean, and then you had Manichaeanism and New Manichaeanism. You'll run into that. Matter of fact, if you look in the religious encyclopedia, Schaff Herzog, you can find these groups, many of these groups, listed under New Manichaeans. And the reason they accused them of that is because that religion was a dualism. They believed that evil was equal to good. And there had always been a conflict between good and evil. Always. So we don't believe that. The Bible doesn't teach that. Evil is not eternal. God is eternal. Amen. Evil is not eternal. Where did evil come from? It had a source in time. Evil came from Lucifer. He rebelled in heaven. Many followed him. He brought it to earth, and Adam and Eve followed him and became evil. But you can hear preachers talk about the eternal conflict of good and evil. There's no eternal conflict. It's a conflict of time, not eternity. And so, because these groups, again, were Puritans, Cathari, they were the pure ones, believed in a holy life. And they preached against the priests that did everything you can imagine, just like they do nowadays. How many priests are they talking about? They're nothing but pedophiles. Been going on with this for years now. And if you ever knew the truth of it, you'd never get to the bottom of it. But because we preach holy living, separate living. If you're a child of God, you don't become a child of God because of the way you live. You become a child of God because of the sovereign grace of God and the redemptive work of Jesus Christ. But once you're saved, it's because you've been born again, and a person that is saved has a desire and pursues that desire to live a life that's pleasing to the Lord. Amen. And that doesn't include drink, drugs, sex, and all of that. Only in marriage, but not even drinking and drugs in marriage. But at any rate, that's exactly why they were accused of being Manichaeans, and that was pretty serious. Lots of people, lots of them died on that. I wanted to get some other stuff here. Hang on. Yeah, I've got my chronology here. Yeah, on your chronology list, we got 431 is the Council of Ephesus. And what happened at 431 at the Council of Ephesus? The official worship of Mariolatry, making Mary the mother of God. 476, the fall of political Rome. 590 is the first pope, and 869 is the division of Roman Catholicism going from the west and to the east. And so even at today, the Pope is over the Roman Catholic Church. And I don't know his name, but the Patriarch. Patriarch just means chief father of the Eastern Orthodox. Now, that's what Pope means is father. So in their name, they've got it in the name. But he doesn't have the credibility that the Pope has or used to have, but that's the division. Then we got these others. We'll take those up later. As we move forward now, let me back around here again. Infant communion. Well, I guess they would just assume that if they baptize those babies, then they ought to give them communion. And that's when that developed. But that's all, nothing from the Bible. It's far removed from the Word of God. And that's all we have there. And the 11th century, lots in the 11th century. Pope Hadrian, in about 1056, he declares celibacy of the priesthood and the nuns. He says from that date, and there were many that had to dump their wives. At that time, you don't hear much about that, but there was a whole lot of carrying on about that. And can you imagine why? I expect there were some wives that didn't like that. But that's when it became canon law that the priests could not marry. Now that's not true of the Greek, because theirs could. And then the nuns, they made them. But here was their lore, here was their legend, is that the nuns, they went through just like the Vestal Virgins in the old Roman Empire. They all got married. But they all supposedly married Jesus. That's who they say they marry. I think they wear a wedding ring and all. They married Jesus. However, Jesus' representative is the priest. Guess what he's got? An instant harem. You read Chenecwy's book, 50 Years in the Church at Rome, and you'll find out, and that goes back a long time, not even modern times, but the old nunneries had lime pits in the cellar. And all of those illegitimate children that they didn't want ended up in those lime pits. They talk like they're against abortion. They weren't against getting rid of those babies. And then the others, the males, the male children that they could teach to sing in the choir, boys' choir, then they would castrate them. And they were called castrata. And they would castrate them because you see a little boy just before he goes into puberty, he's got a high voice. He can go high. But when he goes through puberty, you hear what a boy, he doesn't know how to talk anymore. He has no control over it. They didn't want him to go through that. So what they did, they castrated him. And the rest of their lives, they sang in that choir so they could maintain that high voice and maintain that choir for the Catholics to enjoy. If you get on the internet, if you look for it, you can find a tape, an old tape. Well, it wasn't a tape then, it was film, but it made a tape out of it, of the last of those castrata. It was in the early part of the 1900s, just barely. It was all grainy and all that. But you can hear that poor man singing. And it wasn't anything beautiful to me, how horrible that was. What they did to that man to keep that voice up there. And they did to all those boys, and that went on for hundreds of years. And I'm not sure it's not going on now. If they've got all those orphan children, who do they belong to? Nobody knows who they belong to. They can do anything they want to with it. Yeah, that's going on. All right, we'll Now, I think that I'm ready to start the 6th chapter. Anybody know anything different? But it's not going to matter because I haven't wore it out, no. All right, Proverbs, the 6th chapter. Now, everybody, pay attention. That's all. Pay attention here. My son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if thou hast stricken thy hand with the stranger. Now, I'm going to read that again. My son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if thou hast given the high five with the stranger.
What version is that?
Verse 1.
Version of the Bible.
Well, look what it says. What is a high five? Striking the hands? All right. So what's the problem here? I thought the kids would get a kick out of that. Did you? I don't know whether you did or not. Anyway, but if thou hast stricken thy hand with the stranger, thou art snared with the words of thy mouth, thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Now, of course, he's given this advice to his son. And I believe it's a little stronger than advice because it's the inspiration of God. But if thou art be surety for thy friend. Now that is, if you sign a note for a friend, that's being surety, guaranteeing somebody else's debt. Plain and simple. So a lot of stuff is not new stuff. It's been going on for a long time. But it's always been here in the Bible. At least Proverbs, you got 1,000 years before Christ. You got 3,000 years. At least it's been here written for 3,000 years. I don't know that. It's been here for 3,000 years. Well, the reason you didn't know it because you never read it, never had it taught to you. Both problems. Anyway, so you talk about advice, ways to make it in this world. This certainly would come under that, wouldn't it? Don't ever sign a note for anybody. And if you do, you got troubles. If thou hast stricken thy hand with the stranger. Well, that made an agreement with a stranger. You ought to be very, very, very cautious of that. Because you can get in trouble big time. I don't know, you don't see them on there as much as you used to, but Judge Judy and Judge Mathis and Judge Joe Brown, all those judges. If you watch those shows, I think those are real cases that they have on there. They just agreed to settle them there. But you watch how many people, mostly poor old grannies, that have signed a note for their grandchild to buy a car or to buy a house, and without fail, it goes back to her. She loses her car, or she loses her house, loses her credit, because that grandchild didn't make the payments. Now, that's dangerous business signing a note for anybody. Now, if you're going to give somebody some money, give it, no strings attached. Then you don't look for anything back. But even borrowing money, if I borrow money from somebody and I say, I'm going to borrow $1,000 from you, Derek, and I'll pay you back 6 months from now. This is February, March, April, May, June, July, August. August the 30th is as long as that can go. If I don't pay him back, do you know what I just did? I lied to him and I stole from him. Now that's what that is. I think there's 2 on the top 10 there, isn't it? Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. There's two. Then they get into court. Well, I thought that was a gift. And then they got a email or something there that said, Granny, I'll pay you, I'll start making my payments next week. And then they don't make the payments. But now the people that they borrowed or that bought that car from, they don't even go looking for the grandkid.
That's right.
They go looking for grandma. The signed the note, because that's her loan. If you sign for somebody else, that's your loan until they pay it off, if you're so blessed that they do. Let me tell you this. You sign a note for somebody for a house. Do you know what? When you go apply for a loan, if you don't list that loan in your obligations, they get you for fraud. Fraudulently filling out a credit thing. Because that's on your credit. Until that thing's paid for, that's yours. And that's why there's several verses in here about this. So if you've done it, already done it, most time people don't even ask till it's too late. We found this out, haven't we, honey? That people love to wait till it's all over with, and now it's coming in on me. Now I want some advice. No, you should have gotten this advice before you ever did that.
Amen.
It may be too late to do anything about it. You're hooked. Well, so well, I can't afford to make that payment. You should have thought about that before you signed on. Well, they said they'd pay it. Well, now wait a minute. Why did they need you to sign that note anyway? That should be asked. Well, the bank wouldn't give me a loan. Well, why not? Well, I don't have a good payback record. And you're going to sign the note for them? You might do this. Unless you're a professional financier, banker, if they who are professional bankers say this is too big a risk, you probably ought to take their advice. If a bank won't loan it to you, I know I ain't got no business in this one. Now, if you want to try to get your car, I'll give you $200 to help you pay down on one. And don't worry about paying me back. But I ain't signing your note for you. I believe I'm well within Scripture right here. And how many people they've destroyed themselves for years by this. Anyway, listen what it says. You know what a snare is? It's a trap. I've seen them doing it, especially on those Life Below Zero and the mountain men go out and trap. They go out and just take some wire and make a trap to get a rabbit. And if they're smart enough about it, they'll get them a rabbit. Just that snare, that rabbit get in it and can't get out. He chokes himself to death. But that's what he says. You've been trapped. So, well, they didn't. No, they didn't either. The words of your mouth trapped you. You said, okay, that just trapped you. Your words trapped you. Thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. So he says, do this now, my son, and deliver thyself when thou art come into the hand of thy friend. Go humble thyself and make sure of thy friend. So, if you're already in this, you don't want to make him an enemy. You might want to cook a meal for him and invite him over. And just, how's the loan going? Yes. And don't make them any more angry with you. Make friends of them. Make sure of them. Then they might not bail out on you, but all they got to do is say, I ain't paying it no more. I'll let Granny pay that. And Granny may be on her last legs anyway, financially. But when it comes to money, people change. I was always told, when you loan money to a friend, not only do most of the time you lose the money, you also lose a friend. So, be careful about it. Be careful about it. Give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thine eyelids. Sometimes you can't afford to sleep, even though you're dying to go to sleep. He said, deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, and as a bird from the hand of the fowler. A fowler is a bird hunter. So, he said, well, I'm tired. I can't fool with it now. If you've got a chance to go make sure of your friends, you better do it now. You better not let anything get in your way. And that's a lot of times people just don't understand that. There's sometimes things you have to move on right now, and it couldn't matter less how you feel. Those that have been in boot camp know how that is. And say, oh, Sarge, I ain't had no sleep. He says, I know you must have me confused with someone who cares whether you've had any sleep or not. Because I sure don't. And I'll see to it that you don't get any for the next day or so. So anyway, sometimes it's more important that you get up and take care of things than it is that you get rest, get sleep. Now we get the creature teachers. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Well, now, a sluggard, we haven't had a lot on the sluggards yet. You know what a slug is. I mean, you get up on a cool spring morning or even summer and go out on the sidewalk to get your newspaper, and you haven't got all the sleep out of your eyes, and next thing you know, you feel something ooey gooey between your toes. Slimy, ooey gooey, and you just stepped on a slug. Well, now that slug is supposed to move like that. He was created. He didn't evolve. He was created to move like that. You wouldn't. God didn't create no human being to be a slug. So he says, now go to the ant, thou sluggard. Here you are, he's calling a human being that. Why is he calling them a sluggard? Because they ain't getting up and doing nothing. They're ornery, lazy bums, good for nothing. He says, go watch the ant. Now, we don't like ants. Ladies, do you like ants on your kitchen counter? You take every measure you can to get rid of them, don't you? You put out this and that and whatever you put out. You go buy stuff or put out that boric acid, or I don't know what it gets. Does that get ants? I don't know. It gets, anyway, you put out everything. Ant motels or roach motels, and you do everything to get rid of them. You don't want them on a picnic. You don't want them in your fried chicken on a picnic. You don't want them around. But they're amazing creatures. They really are. And they're so amazing that he takes big, proud man that's too lazy to get up and help himself. He says, I want you to go to the ant. I want you to go to Ant University and matriculate, enroll in Ant University. And I want you to observe the ant. Consider her ways and be wise. You ain't wise now. You consider the ant and her ways, and you'll get wise. Now, the ant which has no guide, no overseer, no ruler. Now, we all know how it is when the boss is away, the mice will play. And I'd run the painting crew. Never had occasion to hire many blacks, but one came to me wanting a job, and I had a big job I was doing, restoring a big old house, and he said he's a painter, talked like he was. So I hired him. And we had him in this bathroom upstairs, a big nice house down on East Main, one of those big nice ones. And I had to go out and check on another job I had going, other people. When you're running crews, you can't stay on the job. You have to go, And I asked him, how's he doing? Well, we haven't seen him. I'd been gone a couple hours. And so I went upstairs to open the bathroom door where it was. I couldn't open it. I got him to put a ladder up against the window. It was on the second floor. That big dude, he was laid out, flaked out asleep with his feet against the door. So I, put some pretty hard moves on it, woke him up. I said, "Oh, buddy, hit the road. I can't have that when the boss is away." Well, see, now he should have gone to the ant. He wasn't wise. If he'd have gone to the ant, he would have seen that ant doesn't quit working. Got nobody telling him what to do. He just gets in. I think I've told you all about down at Dempsey Henderson's in Brazil, San Luis, hot. And by 2 o'clock in the day, you can't do anything. I mean, it's too hot for anybody. Even the Brazilians, everybody takes a nap. Ain't no sense doing nothing else because it's too hot to do anything. As I'm out on Dempsey's front porch, and it's tile, and I'm in a hammock, a hedge is what they call it. Of course, you can get a little air over it and above it and below it and all that. But I wasn't sleeping. I'm watching. And it always been raining, storming. And these big leaves laying out there, big elephant ears. You know the great big plants? There's one laying right there by me. And I caught this little activity there. And there's his ant comes up the steps. And he's in single file, buddy. I mean, it's a whole row of ants. I mean, it's an army of ants. And they march right over to that leaf. I didn't do anything to disturb them. I wanted to watch them. And I'm telling you, they one by one they got over there and they cut out a little piece of that leaf. But by the time they cut it out and they're carrying it back, it's several times bigger than they are. So by comparison, I mean, that's a whole lot of weight for them. And they didn't quit. And it wasn't just a matter of minutes. They had that whole leaf gone. And there wasn't anybody cracking a whip. They knew what they had to do. And they did what they had to do. And that's what he's trying to insist here about the ant to the sluggard. They work without somebody telling them what to do. Why can't you? Well, I need somebody to push me. Then you're an idiot. And you'll never amount to anything. You get your own motivation. Decide what you're going to do. And you do it. If you don't do that, you'll never accomplish anything. Anybody that's ever finished school knows what I'm talking about. You get your own motivation. So, she provides her meat, verse 8, in the summer, and gathers her food in the harvest. Well, now, in the good old summertime, we're going to play and play and play. No, that's not what the ant does. That's not what the ant does in summertime. That ant in the summertime gets all his food put away because they know the winter time's coming. You watch those people up there in Alaska. You think they don't have to have motivation? I mean, I know they talk about how serious, old Slow Joe talks about how serious global warming is. But I tell you, a whole lot more people have died in the last 3 or 4 weeks from the cold than ever have in the summertime, from the weather. Global cooling is far more dangerous than global warming. As a matter of fact, global warming, that opens up how many fields to grow. Relieves your pocketbook. You can live without air conditioning. You can't live without heating. And incidentally, we're going to see all of our heat bills going up because he stopped that pipeline and all, you know. And you seeing your gas going up, all of it's going up. I hope everybody voted for him. I hope they really get a belly full of this. But it's too late now, I guess. Anyway. But it takes a whole lot more to get ready to go through winter. And if you fool around all summer, well, what people that burn firewood? Who is it that waits till the snow blows before they think about getting firewood in? It's a fool, it's a bum, it's a lazy bum, and anybody that's dependent on them is going to freeze to death. I mean, that's truth. You watch people that know what they're doing and they heat with wood. Before it ever gets cold, they've got enough wood put away in dry position that they get through the whole winter. That's what they do in Alaska, buddy. And if they don't do it, they're dead. So, she provides her meat in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. You know the old Aesop's fables and the grasshopper and the ant. The ant working all summer. Grasshopper. Now, I don't mind fiddling. But when you're supposed to be getting your crops in, you ain't supposed to be fiddling. And you know what happens? The ant's got his stuff put away, and there's the grasshopper. Now it's getting cold. I'm getting hungry. Well, hey, you got some food for me? No, I don't. I got food for me. I don't got food for you. You fiddle all summer. Well, how long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? Everybody needs a certain amount of sleep. I don't know how many people actually need 8 hours. Maybe a little kid does. I don't think an adult needs actually 8 hours. You know what you need. What if you got to get up at 7 o'clock and you got to have 8 hours sleep, you better be in bed asleep by 11 o'clock at night. You can't stay up and watch movies and get up at 7 o'clock. Oh, I'm too sleepy to get up. No, that's your foolishness. Don't be a sluggard. How long wilt thou sleep, old sluggard? And you know you can get way too much. You know you get so much sleep that you can't even think straight. You don't need that kind of sleep. When wilt thou rise out of thy sleep? Oh, boy. I love air horns. You know, they've got them in cans, you know. So I can't get him up. I'll get him up. You give me the liberty to get him up, I'll get him up. Grown man can't get out of bed. Ain't no excuse for that. Ain't no excuse for that. Me and my brother, in school, we didn't want to get up for school. Both of us would get up for work with no problem at all. But school, we had a rough time. But when my daddy was home, he didn't have any problem getting us up at all. We slept in the same bedroom. And when we'd hear that back door slam, he was going to the garage. And do you know what he had out there? He had a wooden box for a 6-volt car battery or truck battery, one of those long, slim ones. And it was on straps. And it had a magneto in it, like off a Model T or Model A. And he had a button you push right up here. And there was 2 wires going to a stick. And had black electrician's tape like that. And they had 2 points on the end of it. That's when he hauled bulls, 2,500-pound bull, and they act like they don't want to give you any discipline behavior. Boom, settle them down every time. Where's he going? He's going to get the hot shot. Buddy, our feet's already on the floor. He ain't even left the garage yet. He never did have to hit us with it. All we had to know was he's headed out there to get it. That's all. And he didn't want to, I'm good enough. I want your feet on the floor. And we got up. Now, my mother didn't have that easy a time with us. She wouldn't do that. I really believe he'd have hit us with it if we hadn't got up. And we knew that too. We understood that. Anyway, how long will you sleep? How long wilt thou rise out of thy sleep? And here's what the sluggard said. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. I need 20 more winks. Oh. No, it's time to get up. Get out. Get up. Get up. And he said, so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth. Now, you know the old saying, a rolling stone gathers no moss? That's one that traveleth. Now, I understand sometimes we've got to travel and move. You make moves. But you don't need to be moving every 6 months. I mean, you need to settle down. You start moving a lot, you get poorer every time you move. You really do. You got to stay light someplace and build a life there. You can't just keep on moving. Well, he said, thy poverty will come as one that traveleth, one that never stays in one place. They don't have anything. They've lost everything. They don't have any credit. They don't have any clout at all. And thy want as an armed man, meaning an armed man has been there and took everything that you wanted. He done got it. Between you traveling and losing, there's an armed man that came and got it all. You left with nothing. Well, and why is that? Why'd you do that? Because I wanted to sleep. All right, verse 12. A naughty person, a wicked man, walketh with a froward mouth. All right, we're kind of changing subject here just a little bit. A naughty person, we make fun of that now. Oh, you're naughty, naughty, naughty. But it means bad. A wicked man, probably several steps beyond naughty, walketh with a froward mouth, with a mouth that takes you away from God. Now that's what this guy does. He winketh with his eyes, he speaketh with his feet, he teacheth with his fingers. He's trying to deceive you. He's not saying the words, but he's making the moves. You know you can say a whole lot without saying anything. You let Judge Judy catch you rolling your eyes. See if she won't rule against you right there. You dare roll your eyes at a judge? Or you roll your eyes at your parents? good way to get open hand across your mouth. I mean, because what you're doing, that is so contemptible that you roll your eyes at your mother or your dad. I mean, that's contemptible. It really is. Showing you have no respect for them whatsoever. You'd be better off to put blindfolds on. So, frowardness is in his heart. That's why he's like that. It's in his heart. See, froward is going away from. Toward is going to. Toward is toward the Lord. That's good. Froward is away from the Lord. He deviseth mischief continually. He soweth discord. You watch it on a job. On a job, you get around somebody that's bad-mouthing the job. Guess what? Neither one of you are going to last long. Don't be around somebody that's bad-mouthing your job. Now, a job is not a holy cause. You understand that? A job is a place where you go and you make a gentleman or a lady agreement that they're going to pay you so much for you to do this work. Now, that's an agreement you make. It can't be already wrong if you've agreed to it. So you work that job and you make sure you do what you're supposed to do for that money. If you don't, you're stealing. Plain and simple. But then somebody starts bad-mouthing the boss or bad-mouthing the job. Stay away from them. I can tell when I hear young people that got a job, I like to hear how they're doing on their job. And I can tell you the first time I ask them, I can tell you by their response how long they're going to be on that job. You can too. Just listen to it. If they've already got a load of complaints on that job, it ain't going to last long. It's about gone. It's about gone. You can't stay on a job that you got to complain about. Tell you what, I'm not bragging. I've worked a lot of different jobs. Never had a big paying job. Never had one. The job I was working at when I got my foot crushed, I just started making more money than I'd ever made by the hour in my whole life. It was $12.50 an hour. That was the most money I'd ever made in my life working by the hour. And you can ask anybody that knows me, you ain't never heard me complain about one job I've ever had. I've had some nasty, dirty jobs, cleaning out cattle trailers, cleaning out hog trailers. Nasty, dirty jobs. I ain't never complained about a job, and I ain't never got up and said, I hate that job. I ain't going back to work. Never done it. Never done it in my life. And I've pretty much never been out of work, when I got my foot crushed, I had to quit that. But other than that, hey, I don't want to be around and people start doing that. I don't have anything to do with them. I get away from them. Say, well, you got to be friends. No, I don't. I don't have to be friends on my job. I got to be a worker on my job. I got to do my job. Now, I have rebuked people. I really have. So listen, I prayed for this job. I've been praying for this job. I needed this job. And don't you be bad-mouthing what God sent me. Did it right over at W.T. Young's warehouse. Going to Lexington Baptist College and ran out of work. January, weather just like this. You try to get painting to do in this kind of weather. I didn't run out of work. That Lord's wife canceled the job on me that I'd have taken that over other jobs, and then she canceled on me, didn't even tell me about it. So I was out of work. Got a call. I'm desperately looking for work. I got a call from Orville Butts at Hackle Motor Freight. He said, Jerry, can you come to work? I said, I'll be right there. And I had to stop, buy me some pants to wear to go run city delivery. And they gave me the roughest job they had. Had a Cracker Barrel GMC road tractor with the 45-foot trailer loaded with IBM cards, triple stacked all the way back. You remember what they used to come in those 45-pound boxes? And every one of them had to be picked up and categorized and put on a pallet. Every one of them. And you just see far back as you can see all them. And I backed into that dock, had those doors open, those guys, it's not like on a Monday morning. Man, they started cussing, seeing what I had. Of course, naturally they gave me the bad load. I'm the new guy there. And they started cussing. I said, boys, listen, if you're going to do like that, you just go on. I'll handle this trailer by myself. I don't want you around because you're cussing God. I've been praying for this job, and I need this job, and you're cussing what God sent me. And I said, I don't want to be anywhere around you because you're going to bring the wrath of God down on your head. So if that's all you can do, go on. I'll do it by myself. I mean, was dead serious too. Anyway, they went on, helped load and shut their mouths. But, well, I mean, so you get all upset. I was upset, and I've been begging God to send me some work, and he sent me some work, and these idiots are cursing God for it. You ornery sluggard, go on. If you don't like your job, go on. I saw one over there, he just griping about his job, and they fired him. Now you got what you wanted. And he tried to get the union to get him back in there, and they couldn't do it. I thought that was really nice. Verse 12. Well, let's see, that's not where I am. Frowardness in his heart, verse 14. He deviseth mischief continually. He soweth discord. That's what got me on that. Sowing discord. Trying to get everybody else upset with that job. What are you trying to do? Start a riot? Shut your mouth and go to work. You ain't getting paid to talk. You're getting paid to work. Therefore shall his calamity come suddenly. Suddenly shall he be broken without remedy. That'll happen. Now these 6 things doth the Lord hate. Yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. Now believe me, there's more than 7 things that God hates. Amen. But the poetical way that it is stated, these 6 things, yea, 7 is a number of completion. And so this is a poetical way of saying these things God hates, and they make a whole set here. So, a proud look. Now, all of us are capable of getting that. But God hates it. A lying tongue, kids. Y'all hear me? You hear what God says? He hates a lying tongue. You better bite your tongue before you lie. And hands that shed innocent blood. Well, hands that shed innocent blood. Do you reckon that this would include all of the doctors' assistants, nurses, and aides that assist in murdering unborn babies? And you have them saying, oh, this is God's work. Oh, no. God hates hands that shed innocent blood. And you can't get any more innocent than an unborn baby. There's nothing heroic about that. Now, if you want to go out and take on an army troop, help yourself. I expect they can handle you. If you want to go get a SWAT team and try to shed that blood, you'll have yours shed. But it doesn't take any courage at all to get your mask on and your gloves, and you got the woman laying there, and you go up there and you grab that baby, start cutting its legs off and sucking its brains out. And that's what that does. That's how they do that. I think everybody that is pro-abortion, and that would be every Democrat is pro-abortion. Every Democrat is pro-abortion. They can't help but be. If they're pro-Democrat, they're pro-abortion, because that is the top floor of the program of the Democrat Party. That is the top echelon. That's the first thing they are concerned about. And the second thing are LGBT stuff. So, hands that shed innocent blood. I'm going to tell you that if you're involved in abortion, God hates you. Yeah. I have to tell you that. That's scripture. That's what God says. Amen. I'll quit with that. We'll finish it up next time.